The UK, a country known best for its fish and chips, punk bands, and now crippling national debt. The UK's national debt has risen by 16.7% over the past 5 years, and it's starting to feel like that number is just gonna get bigger. In this video, we'll be retracing the horrible decisions that the UK's government has made to bring the country's economy down to its knees and into recession. Stick around until the end of the video to figure out what the parliament might be doing to dig itself out. The UK today. If you're anyone living outside of the United Kingdom, then you may not even be able to tell that the UK is already in recession. But if you're a citizen, then it doesn't come as much of a surprise. Now, recession is a big and scary word, but what does it mean for a country exactly? Well, to put it simply, recession just means that a country's GDP is on the decline. A lower GDP means that your country and its citizens aren't doing too great. And well, if you live in the UK, it's pretty obvious. As things are now, major sectors such as manufacturing, construction, and wholesale have all been dragging the economy down. Public works and utilities are falling apart at the seams with lack of funding. Heck, even the justice system isn't working at full capacity, with the government closing some courts in an attempt to save on utilities. Other than these telltale signs of recession, the National Statistics official requirements to be labeled as a country in recession would be back-to-back fiscal quarters of GDP falling. And just like that, the UK filled in all the spaces for a recession bingo card as of the start of 2024. But perhaps the most alarming part about all this is the tax to GDP ratio. As it stands, tax is making up a majority of the UK's GDP, and that's never a bad thing. Having a GDP that's made up of mainly tax revenue is such a bad look because that means that at this point, the citizens are funding the government. To put this into better context, the last time the GDP was this dependent on taxes was 70 years ago, during the World War. Let that sink in. Brexit breaks the bank. Oh wow, I haven't heard that in a while. Brexit, a shorthand for Britain's exit, is Britain's successful separation from the European Union. This was an attempt to fully separate itself from the EU and regain its sovereignty. Not being part of the European Union means that now the laws and immigration were going to be decided by them and them alone. The UK officially left the EU on January 31st, 2020, but the effects of this continue to be felt until today. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to state that Brexit has had irreversible and long-lasting effects on the UK economy. It's like an arm tearing away from its body. It's a good hand, don't get me wrong, but can it run? No, it obviously can't. And because of this, the UK's economy plummeted. Even before the UK left the EU, investors began pulling out due to fears of the United Kingdom not being able to stand as its own country. Not only that, but its newfound sovereignty made international trade much more complicated and costly due to new tariffs imposed. The UK's workforce was also cut down significantly due to new labor laws and immigration laws making the lives of migrant workers much harder. In other words, the UK had to start from scratch as its own country. Although this may have had its benefits in the long run when the UK has become more established, no one could have predicted what happens next. Debt hole. The coronavirus pandemic was a curveball that no nation could have prepared for. Coronavirus took over the entire world, shutting down economies and ruining the lives of many innocent people. Although the world has since recovered from the pandemic nightmare with the help of vaccines, there sadly isn't a vaccine for economic debt. During the pandemic, Rishi Sunak and his parliament allotted a grand total of £280 billion to the support of families and businesses during the COVID pandemic, a service which is perfect for its citizens, but not for the future of the UK. Now, at the time, these were sound decisions. Creditors were charging interest rates at their lowest margins ever considering the gravity of the situation, and these low interest rates made the payments manageable. It was a calculated risk, but sadly for everyone, coronavirus wasn't the only curveball of the decade. On the 24th of February 2022, Russia would invade Ukraine as the ultimate act of war. War is never easy and oftentimes never only concerns two countries. Most of the time, wars affect the entire world. Seeing how Russia threw the first stone against Ukraine with multiple acts of war, Europe stood in solidarity with Ukraine and enacted multiple trade restrictions involving Russia. No trade meant no income, and no income meant no means to fund their war. Another noble decision by the government, but one that would cripple the United Kingdom's economy. This crippling effect comes from the UK being dependent on Russia's energy supply. suddenly oil and gas became thrice as expensive to import, and this cost fell to UK households. Of course, many of the UK citizens were up in arms against the sudden surge. As protests reached a fever point, the UK government once again decided to help the citizens by taking in additional loans, which totaled to £400 billion. Sadly, the side effect of these billions borrowed is the increased inflation, and that's never a good thing. High inflation means higher consumer goods prices, and higher prices means less people willing to make purchases. Before inflation could get any more out of hand, the central bank thought of one natural solution: increase interest rates on already existing loans. The zero-rated interest for the £400 billion borrowed now face interest rates where there was none before. To put it into perspective, this meant that the UK needed to pay an additional £60 billion every year just to meet debt requirements. This would put an even larger strain on the United Kingdom's already bleeding economy. But perhaps the nail in the coffin on all of this would be stagnation. The recession labeled on the UK was admittedly an exaggeration. While yes, it did fit the bill for an economy in recession due to its low GDP and to back-to-back fiscal quarters of negative growth, it still wasn't alarming. What's alarming is the fact that the UK, with its growing mountain of debt, has put in close to no effort in bolstering its economy. Proof of stagnation could be found in last year's overall GDP growth of only 0.5%. This comes right after Rishi Sunak's parliament promised the UK citizens that his office would put in the effort to bolster the economy. So now that we know the UK's in debt and found itself in a rut, what now? Well, the UK can go about it in a few ways. Possible fixes. The first item on the list of every UK citizen is vote out Rishi Sunak.
Get out.
It was evident that his approach to the economy wasn't working at all, and it needed a fresh new set of eyes. As such, Keir Starmer was elected as the UK's new Prime Minister. But now, Keir has found himself in a huge rut. He's tasked with cleaning up the mess that the previous government has made. Of course, one of the easier solutions for this would be to take out another loan to fund the country's investments. But he can't possibly add another pile to the mountain of loans. He also can't increase taxes because the UK citizens would definitely riot. Enter a recent study by the Resolution Foundation and the Center for Economic Performance. The study claims that the way out of this financial rut could be found in the UK's unnoticed assets, services. The UK is one of the biggest service exporters in the world. The UK is in a great time zone and has a wealth of languages that can accommodate clients all over the world, and leaning into that may improve the overall income per citizen and provide more work. Another glaring statistic in this report is the fact that the UK is lagging behind when it comes to investments, which is a weird statistic considering the UK has made a few smart investments that netted them a lot of money. But for some reason, all of these investments were short-lived. But of course, this isn't a step-by-step plan. Doing all this doesn't guarantee that the economy would be fixed overnight. This is a long-term strategy that may not even be taken into consideration. But it might be the closest thing that the UK has to a plan to dig itself out. And now, it's up to Keir Starmer to enact it.